The other thing we wanted to just touch on at the top of the show here was about the Joe Schmidt factor in what's actually going on with Ireland at the moment. He seems mystified by what's going on in the camp, which is far more worrying than the idea that you and I are mystified by what's actually going on in the Ireland camp. And the question has been asked, and I'm sure has been on a lot of people's minds this morning by David Kelly in the Irish Independent: has Joe Schmidt's early exit call caused players to slacken off? And it is a legitimate question, Anthony. Like, it has to have a little bit of a bearing. The way I see it, though, is kind of like you're still trying to impress this guy for what some people have been calling as the biggest World Cup in Ireland rugby's history, because of the potential they have to go beyond the quarterfinals this time. And also you have his successor in the camp at the moment as well.
Correct. Yeah, so I listen, it's a question that needs to be asked, but I don't think there's any, semblance of say, evidence behind it. I don't, like, you take the results, and listen, it's results-based business, as they say. You look at the New Zealand game, where they beat New Zealand. Really, if you analyse it, a week before, England really softened up New Zealand, okay? England lost by a point to them in a bruising game over there. So New Zealand came here fairly battered and bruised at the end of the season. Great win for Ireland, etc., etc. But everyone then was saying, world beaters, number 2 in the world, or whatever it was, pushing for number 1. They are top of their game. And I think it's just been a little bit of the teams have really analysed them and kind of worked them out. Some players have gone off the boil. Some players like Sexton and Murray, people are talking about it a lot, have gone off the boil. Maybe there is a little bit of pressure. Maybe, as Rory O'Connor actually in the Independent was kind of saying, and Schmidt was even alluding to, they were in the hole, and they seem to be just continuously trying to dig. As he was saying, well, they're going up to Belfast this weekend, and maybe they need to actually take a step back. I'd say they need to, maybe just sit back, understand the achievements that they've made, understand the strides that they've made, take a bit of pressure off themselves. Now, that won't help them if they come out on Sunday week and France give them a beating here at home, which could very easily happen, by the way. With this thing of the French team, which one is going to turn up? But I was mightily impressed by them against Scotland last week. So I think you've got a situation for Schmidt. I don't really see it. If myself and yourself were in there, we're saying, well, Andy Farrell's next, so we're going to go absolutely hell for leather to make sure that our international careers stay on track. And also there's the prize of getting onto a World Cup team. So I don't really get that. I think it's just a situation where maybe they were a bit Italy. A few fellas made some uncharacteristic efforts. Yes, maybe. I think there was just a number of things that just all kind of joined together. Is the French game a big game as regards the result or as regards the performance? I think France will bring a devil-may-care attitude and really go at the structure of Ireland, because they're very, very steadfast and very, very, as I say, they're kind of nearly, it's rugby by numbers to a large degree. France, I would hope, are going to be, which you could see at the weekend, a bit more expansive, a bit more kind of, just having a go. So I think it's going to be a really good chance for him to try to experiment. I suppose I'm a bit disappointed in the sense of the way he should have set really this Six Nations up, in my mind, would have said, and I think he tried to do it small, but he really should have said, this is really an experimental basis for the World Cup. This is not about results. I think he really should have laid the ground before it started.
But I don't think that was actually the case. I don't think Joe Schmidt was ever thinking this is an experimental basis. I think there was always the idea that it's going to be the second prize, or it's going to be the thing you're judged second most on when it comes to the year 2019. I think that's certainly true. But I think what the question about is Joe Schmidt's exit call affecting the players, I think that would suggest that there is a complacency within the camp. And when I look at the body language on Sunday, it doesn't suggest to me complacency. It suggests to me that they're getting angry quite easily, they're getting frustrated quite easily, which is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum a little bit. That the idea that, and it's an easy thing for any coach to come out and say that the players are trying too hard because it takes the pressure off the coach. Part of me actually does buy that. It does buy the idea that there is sort of an over-effort in areas here, that it really just isn't coming naturally to them, and the errors are coming as a result of frustration and things like that as well. Like, maybe I'm being way too forgiving on that front, but it certainly seems that there is something in the idea that the players are trying too hard. So
are you trying to say that you think that the players are at fault or the coaches are at fault?
Well, I think that the idea that Ireland's players have got complacent because their coach is leaving at the end of the World Cup, I just think it may be a very, very tiny factor in it, but the reason why their performances have been subpar, especially on Sunday, doesn't suggest to me it's as a result of complacency.
Yeah, I don't, people will say there's complacency, and people would say that, you know, body language. It's hard, and I know they're only human, right? But in a professional setup and the way Schmidt runs things, it is fairly methodical. Okay, everyone has a job. You're meant to just do your job. That's the idea. You know, you go, you do your job to the best of your ability. If you don't do your job, someone else will do your job. I think he is finding that as he starts to go through his top 15 players, that he has another 15 players who just can't do that job as well as the guy who was previously there. He alludes in one, I think the Rory O'Connor piece about England, that if you remove 4 to 5 of England's best players, they just don't have the same players to come in. And he's right. Like, you take Farrell out of that team, you take Tuolagi, you take some of the Vunipola and so, they don't really necessarily have the impact players who can take it on. The massive thing, I think, for Ireland and for all of the teams coming into the World Cup is all going to be about panel. And I think maybe he's doing a little bit of, oh, look over here, you know, this is going on. But at the same time, he's finding things out. I saw him saying, you know, we'll categorise it, we'll put it in our memory about, say, Delan. So Delan was maybe a thing he'd look and go, okay, he's an option now. He's a big option for the World Cup. Maybe I need to get a bit more time in there. And really, when you're trying to experiment and trying to get fellas to stand up, when is the time you really want to look at that as a coach? You don't want to look at a fella who's going to really stand out or who's going to stand up when you're flying it, when you're beating teams left, right and centre. You want to see them in the trenches. You want to see them in a situation like that. 16-12 behind at half time. You're in a situation, you go into the dressing room, you're saying, right, and you look around at the fellas and say, it's up to you to dig yourself out of this. Now, the fellas who put their hands up in that second half and do that, and Schmidt will analyse the living daylights out of that, they'll be the fellas that he will remove maybe from the bottom of his list up to the top of his list and go, okay, these are really viable players now for the World Cup. So, like, in those times of adversity, which I think the French match, what I really would love is France come absolutely hell for leather. They have to. They need more challenges like that, because he needs the answers. I saw him saying, you know, it's all back down to hard work. Yes, agree, but it's going to be down to the reaction as players. And that's why I suppose, I take your point, some of the reaction by some of the players wasn't good.
No.
You know, it wasn't good. And there's a little bit of the old throwing the toys out of the pram a little bit. You know, it's Sexton, say, for part of it, but other players' body languages do say. But I think it's all about him and his management team finding out answers on players. And sometimes, be it a tight win or a loss, that's where you really find out about a guy and you say, actually, can I really rely on him? No.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting one. I'm sure it'll come up again as we go through the back pages. Let's tell you what's coming up first, though, on today's OTB AM.